So this is a ubiquitous sign in rock music and heavy metal circles, and I thought I'd do a video on it. When I was younger, I was raised in very religious circles, and when I left those circles, I don't need to really go into detail as to what exactly they were, but when I left those circles and sort of explored the world for myself, I was a little annoyed at the miseducation that I got having to do with things like Satanism, witchcraft, stuff like that. And I think most religions do a poor job at educating or staying up on, the proper definitions of things. They resort to hyperbole and often laced with superstition and with finger pointing. And, so when I sort of got into bands and stuff, and I played in a few darkwave bands and goth bands and edgy bands back in the day. I thought music, rock music, metal, darkwave, punk, all that stuff would give me a better education. And I have to say that it doesn't. I was triggered to, wrong word, triggered. I was motivated to do this video yesterday when I watched a video of a musician talking about Satanism in music. And, what he said about Satanism was just pure whiffle. It was just crap. And, most bands, particularly those who started dabbling in the occult, which just means hidden knowledge. That's all it means. It's got nothing to do with Satanism or witchcraft or the devil or paganism. When the early bands started to mess around with that stuff and come out with upside down crosses and devil, satanic symbolism in their music, most of the time it was just acting up and being rebellious. It wasn't really anything serious, and they didn't really understand what Satanism really was, and that's obvious by the way it was presented, always for shock value, always sort of cartoonishly in those videos. I mean, bands like Black Sabbath, named Black Sabbath, they were fashioning themselves more on horror movies than anything, truly occult, and they'll admit that now. And I think most of your first wave metal bands were like that too. And it wasn't probably until the 90s that you had people that actually were educated about Satanism or the occult or witchcraft or anything like that, styling themselves as such. And one thing that really annoys me about rock music in general is it conflates a lot of these things, and it really is a misnomer to do so. For instance, Satanism, witchcraft, and paganism aren't synonymous at all. The Pagani obviously were nature-based religious peoples of pre-Christian eras, so that includes Greece and Rome and most of the subcontinent Africa, the Americas. Most tribal religions are pagan-based. It's got really nothing to do with the devil, but often the words are interchangeable. Witchcraft, we have no real connection to ancient witchcraft. Most witchcraft today is what we call neo-pagan witchcraft. Even stuff like Wicca was created in the 20th century, stylized on scant knowledge we have of ancient witchcraft, but really new religions. I mean, Wicca was formed by Gerald Gardner, who lived in Malay and based a lot of his ideas on, sort of the cultures that he immersed himself in. Really not much to do with ancient witchcraft. And there are some people that claim to be tradcraft or traditional, most of which will not believe in Satan. It's a pagan, of the earth, kind of nature-based, seasonal cycles kind of deal. Occasionally you get people who claim to be black witches, but it's all very spurious, I think. I'm not sure if it's really, any sort of witchcraft at all. Again, it's just shock jockery for the most part. And even the people that bang on about the devil and Satan don't really know what they're talking about. I mean, firstly, if you read the source material, whether it's the Quran or the Bible, there's absolutely nothing in the texts that say that Satan, Beelzebub, Lucifer, the devil are all the same being. There is nothing. When the devil's introduced in the Old Testament, he is the adversary. That's what it means. And he seems to be in God's employ. He seems to be on the books and does God's bidding. If you read the book of Job, he's providing a function. He's sort of testing Job on God's behalf. It's not until the New Testament that you get any real notion of the modern day Satan. And even then he's not fleshed out like he is today. There's no horns. There's none of the modern stylings. That's really an early church infatuation. When Christianity was Romanized, after it first of all was made a legal religion by Constantine, and then made the state religion to the detriment of all other competing religions by Theodosius. The early church then became enamored with things like the Book of Revelations, which was a latecomer to the canon. It was unorthodox or not canonical until the mid-3rd century, and it was the late stuff that popularized this whole business of Satan or the beast or 666 and all that. It wasn't really part of the original Christian message, whatever that would have been, because we've sort of lost the roots of the religion. Most of the Old Testament is really second generation. Most of the writings are by Paul of Tarsus, who was not an eyewitness and sort of fashioned his own brand of the Christos myth, including a lot of pagan elements, which probably were fused with his ideas of Satan as well. And then when you get Satanism in general, most Satanists today, whether it's the Church of Satan or Levian Satanism, there are 3 or 4 major branches of Satanism. Most of them are atheists. They don't even believe in Satan. For him, he is a symbolic character that teaches a certain philosophy. If you read the Anton LaVey's book, it's got nothing to do with these sort of very cartoonish black mass, very dramatic presentations of darkness and evil and stuff like that. It's more of a philosophy, and it's actually quite intellectual. I used to live down the street from Anton LaVey's house in San Francisco. I used to walk by it, see if I could get a glimpse of anything going on. I never did see anything, but my point is that rock and roll has done nothing but further misinform people about such issues. I mean, there are theistic Satanists. There are people that sort of, all they do is take the Christian religion and subvert it. So they just do the opposite thing. They do a black mass. They do, they sort of do rituals from the Christian church, borrow from the Christian calendar, and then just subvert it so that it's evil instead of good. It's all very, very cartoonish, and I'd say that's a minority, if anything, of people who confess to be Satanists. So I'm not sure if rock and roll was ever the devil's music, whatever that means, and I certainly don't think that rock and roll has done a good job in educating on any of these things. If anything, it's just made things even more superstitious, deliberately obscured, and just sort of made everything trite and silly and mocking, and it's a shame, really, because I think most religions are guilty of doing that themselves, all on their own, without getting the help from secular culture as well. I don't really have a point to this. I just think it's a fascinating subject, along with music and literature and mythology. I love to study theology and religion as well. And I love studying how it intersects with music. And so, whenever people introduce their bands as being occult, my ears prick up, and a lot of times I'm disappointed because it's just the same old trite, black robes and upside down crosses and gurgling blood and just being, juvenile more than anything else. Whereas the true occult, is just mystical and hidden knowledge that you're trying to attain in order to better yourselves. All of the occult groups of the 19th century, from the Golden Dawn to the Masons to all kinds of neo-Egyptian cults, are just basically trying to access ancient knowledge and decode ancient texts. It's got really nothing to do with good and evil. That's sort of a constructed overlay that we're guilty of putting on all this. But I'm looking forward to discovering bands that really know or delve into, and there are some, that don't just do it for attention and shock value, but actually have something to impart and to teach. They're a minority, and those are the bands that when you hear them and when you sample their music, it can be a bit meaningful than just an extension of what Kiss and Alice Cooper started in the 70s, and Marilyn Manson continued in the 90s. There's not really much occult with all that stuff, and there's really not that much demonic either, to be honest with you. So, has rock and roll ever been the devil's music? Really? Do we even know what we're saying when we profess that it is, or when we gravitate to it for the sake of our teenage and, in my case, later rebellions? Interesting question. I'm wondering what you think there out there in the audience. You have a lot of tastes. You're always referencing bands and musicians that I've yet to hear of, even though I'm an absolute audiophile nerd. I used to do my own radio shows for a while too, so I take seeking out new music very seriously, and I spend a lot of time doing it every month. But this subject sometimes comes up, and I'm always slightly disappointed by these people who just pander to the stereotype of being satanic or devilish or whatever. It just gets silly for me. Sometimes it's fun, but a lot of times it's kind of repetitious. What do you think? Well, you metalheads out there, or is it just demonic anime? Is that all it is? Just acting out, subverting Christian rituals and presenting them as opposite, just throwing the devil in, substituting the devil or Satan for Christ. Is it really that simple? I'm kind of off topic here, and this won't appeal to everyone, but I think it's interesting stuff. So, see you on the next one.